All right.
Get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Anna Thornton, and we're so excited to be able to host you here at the David Barnett Gallery this evening for an artist talk with David Barnett. David is celebrating 60 years of running his gallery this year, and so we're so excited to be able to hear his stories and reflections on his career as an art dealer, and then he'll also be sharing about his latest series of work that he created specifically for this exhibition. So, and then at the end, by the way, we'll have a little time for questions, so be thinking while he's speaking of things you want to ask him. And with that, we'll dive right in. So David, can you tell us the name of your latest series and what inspired you to create it?
Yeah, this particular series was inspired by the music of George Gershwin, who had a big influence on me when I first heard Rhapsody in Blue when I was 6 or 7 years old, and it stayed with me all these years. And so there was a musician that was in here a couple of years ago, and he brought me this book from an exhibition that was in Florida, in Naples, Florida, at the J. Baker Museum facility there. And so when I saw this, it gave me the idea to do this exhibition, which actually has 3 components to it. So the show is called Sounds: Gershwin, Kandinsky, and yours truly. So it's something that, for me, after being in the business for 60 years, is very special because I've always painted to music from the time I was 6 years old, and I listened to Eric Satie. When I was 12 years old, I would meditate face down on my parents' living room floor for 3 hours at a time. I didn't know I was meditating at the time, but that's what I was doing. So, but anyway, so this exhibition has the 3 components, and so George Gershwin, of course, was, aside from being an unbelievable musician, he was also a talented artist, and he was a really significant art collector during the 1930s Depression because he had written approximately 700 compositions, and so he was in his 30s and he was wildly successful during the Depression. And his cousin, who was an artist, lived in Paris, and so he was sending Gershwin some different artworks, different photos, and suggesting for Gershwin to buy different things. So part of this show is artworks by artists from my collection by the same artists that George Gershwin collected. So Picasso, André Masson, Matisse, Kandinsky, and so on and so forth. So, and then the other component, the second component is Kandinsky woodcuts from Planga, which means sounds. And this is a series that Kandinsky produced between 1906 and 1912 in Germany. And the interesting thing is, for Kandinsky, music was just as important as in his creation of his artwork as well. And the similarity between art and music, it's all the same, you know, composition and line and balance and form and color and so on. And so both Gershwin and Kandinsky, and I think probably myself, would see things or hear things and actually see them in colors. And Anna, you can explain that better than I can.
Oh, it's the conditioned synesthesia. So where it's one sense is interpreted through another sense. So for Gershwin, he could hear colors and kind of see sounds, and they were kind of interchangeable.
Yeah, pretty fascinating. And unbeknownst to me actually, until I got this catalog from this exhibition, Gershwin actually did artworks too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah. So then the third component of the show is artworks that that I did, inspired by listening to Gershwin's music. So I have 11 oil pastels, and we have QR readers next to each piece, so you can actually listen to the music that I listened to when I was doing the drawings. And then we also made this video. We don't have the sound on now, but so this is me doing these drawings at my home studio on Beaver Lake. And Heinzel, you can't hear the piano, but Heinzel was playing the piano out there, and I was interpreting the music visually. So that's the third component. And then the piece over the mantle is, I did that listening to Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, and that's 5 colors in iridescent acrylic. And then probably can't all see this over here now, but this one, it did 11 colors in iridescent acrylic, listening to Rhapsody in Blue too. So that's most recent. And so I really couldn't articulate the importance of Rhapsody in Blue, but this statement says it all. The song Rhapsody in Blue is often associated with the extraordinary and magnificent. It can also be seen as an embodiment of the American experience, reflecting the diversity and boundless creativity of the country. To me, that says it all. So that's it. Yeah.
So these 11 pastel drawings that you did, David, out at your house, they were all created within the space of the music, and for a lot of those songs, it was a very brief kind of moment in time. So what was it like creating those?
Like the preludes could have been only a minute and a half or 2 minutes. So I had Heinzel Kunzman, the pianist. First I had him play each song so I could hear it and think about it, and then he played it a second time, and then I did the drawings to that afterward. Because when you only have a minute or 2 minutes, you have to work and think very quickly. So that was a very unusual experience for me, because to be able to work so spontaneously, it was actually fun, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Wonderful. And was there a particular piece of music that you listened to during the session that spoke to you the most?
Well, all of Gershwin's music does, but in addition to Rhapsody in Blue, I always loved the 1935 folk opera Porgy and Bess, and of course the song "Summertime" has been recorded by probably hundreds of different musicians from all different genres, you know, and so that's probably one of my favorites, because one of the pieces that from the Porgy and Bess was a piece that I did. You'll see it out there. It's called "I've Got Plenty of Nothing, and Nothing's Plenty for Me." And so I thought it was a lot of fun doing a painting of nothing. Yeah.
This show is all about the synergy between music and art, and I think this body of work that you've created really captures that with the color and just the expression and energy you were able to capture on canvas. So. But this latest series is only one of many over your whole career as an artist. You've created, I think, 23 different series. And so we have a few of those here. I guess we'll start with this one on the wall.
I don't know if you can all see these, but so one of the series that I do is called the Famous Artist Series, and where I use obviously famous artists as a point of departure. It could be, in this case, Kandinsky, but I've done lots of other famous artists. But that's this particular series. These are all based on that. So the black and white part is from a Kandinsky woodcut that he did between 1906 and 1911, and then I watercolored each one. So they're original pieces.
And why do you think it's important for artists to look at other artists' work as kind of a source of inspiration or form of departure?
Well, I think the idea that we're all influenced by all kinds of things in our lives. And so what could be better than be influenced by other artists?
And then which series would you like to talk about next?
Okay, so this piece here I did, so after I got rejected from the Vietnam War, then I left UWM and I didn't pick up a paintbrush for 20 years because I wanted to get the gallery going. But in 1992, I wanted to go to Mexico City to meet some artists that I was interested in. So I went to Mexico City in 1992, and I was so influenced and impressed by the artists that I met and the culture and the history in that city. And so this particular piece, it's called First Impressions of Mexico City #1, and in Spanish, Una pata arriba, which means in Spanish, one leg up. And so the story was I was in a cab in Mexico City, one of the 4 million yellow VW Beetles. And Mexico City, you know, it's a very polluted city and very crowded. And so we were stuck in a traffic jam. It took over 2 hours just to go 5 miles in a cab to this art studio. And in the car next to me was an young American, and she had her radio blasting, and her left leg, she was driving, and her left leg was out the driver's side window. And so we started a conversation with her, and I thought it was rather funny. So I said to Hector, who was a Chicago art dealer from Puerto Rico, I said, how do you say in Spanish one leg up? He says, una pata arriba. So when I came back, I did this piece of me. This is me dying of the exhaust fumes from all the pollution in Mexico City. Una pata arriba. And I did another piece also in Mexico City that Joanne bought, called that came from eating in an outdoor cafe in Mexico City. I ordered a side order of broccoli, and it was bright green, and I'm looking down and I think, am I hallucinating? Because it looked like the broccoli was moving, and I looked down, these bright green worms, identical shade of green to the broccoli. And so I looked at it and I thought about it, and I thought, well, it must be organic broccoli or there would be worms. So I pushed the worms aside and ate the broccoli. I never got sick in Mexico City in 2 weeks. So it's called broccoli sin worms, por favor. It's in the kitchen.
Yeah, it's in my kitchen.
Yeah. This next piece here is from a series that I did in 2019 when I was in Miami, Florida, at the Basel Art Fair. So the Swiss Art Fair that's been going on for probably 50 years. They decided to do a branch show in Miami, Florida, which is now going on for probably 25 years. But anyway, I was wearing this aquamarine bluish green sport coat when I was there. And I thought it was very funny because about 50 people came up to me and said, where do you get that? I'd like to buy one of those, you know. And so when I got home, I tried to find them in the mail order catalog, but they were sold out. So we pressed my sport coat, and then we photographed it, and then we printed it in all different sizes. And so then I found from my daughter's toys the 2 rubber fish, and so I put those in there. And for the head, because I like surrealism, and Rene Magritte, he did the famous bowler hat with the apple in his face. So it's called Miami Crypto Man. So that's my cryptocurrency, is the sand dollar. That's how much I think of cryptocurrencies. Yeah. And anyway, so that's kind of that one. And then this piece here it's from my Target series, and most of my work is very playful, as you can see, but this is the only really serious series that I've done, and it's called the Target series. So this is based on a target that when I was 14 years old, my parents sent me to Camp Manitowish in Boulder Junction. They said, okay kids, you're going to learn how to shoot a gun today. And so I didn't know at the time I was a pacifist, but from 50 feet away, the first time I ever shot a gun, I hit the bullseye, so I thought I was a hot shot. So I saved that target all those years. And then another man shooting, I wasn't too thrilled, so I wanted to express that, so I started doing this series. And so I use a lot of Native American images because of what we did to the Native Americans, and stole all their land and murdered most of them. So this is an homage, in this particular one, homage to Geronimo.
When did you do that?
This one I did in 2020. But this particular image here is from a tempera painting that I did when I was in high school, actually. Because I was always interested in Native American culture. Yeah. And then the teepees are made out of birch bark. And so we used to go up north, and so I started doing up north series painted in birch bark. So that's where that comes from. I figured Egyptians can have papyrus, those of us in Wisconsin can have birch bark. Fair enough, right? Yeah. And then I use a lot of rubber stamps in my work because my dad used to read the New Yorker magazine, and Sal Steinberg, the artist that did a lot of drawings and things for the New Yorker magazine, since I was 2 years old. My dad read that magazine. And so he was really the first influence on me as an artist. Yeah. And I actually met Sal Steinberg in New York at a 4th of July picnic in East Hampton years ago, and he was on the lawn and drinking his wine, and I ran up to him and I said, wow, you're the first artist that ever influenced me. And he looks up and he said, get lost, kid. Sometimes you have to separate the art from the artist.
I loved just hearing about your different series. There's such a range, and I like that you include found objects too, because it's like there's little pieces of your own personal history in each piece.
Thank you.
Is there anything else about your work as an artist that you want to talk about before we move on to your work as an art dealer?
Well, I'll be here all night.
All right, well, we'll move on then. And you can tell everyone what prompted you to open an art gallery?
Yes. So I was a student at UWM studying fine arts and art history, and I thought, well, I'll either starve to death opening a gallery or starve to death as an artist. So I thought opening a gallery might be the easy way out. But I was in a printmaking class, and I went up to the professor, Mr. Burkett, and I told him that I was going to open an art gallery. And he looks me right in the face and he says, don't bother, you're going to fail. Well, I won't tell you what I thought, but 10 years later, he walked into my gallery with his portfolio, and I bought a couple prints from him, and I kind of felt sorry for him because he really wasn't that good of an artist, and so his works weren't selling, and he needed a job, so he took a job teaching, and on the other hand, his wife was enormously talented, Nancy Echolm-Berkovich. She was winning Caldecott Awards for her children's book publications. And so he was just a very depressed guy and not too happy. But anyway, so that's the way that went.
Interesting.
And what was your mission when you first started the gallery?
Yeah, so my mission, because in 1966, there were very few galleries in Milwaukee and very few galleries that would be interested in showing young artists where there's no reputation and the works were priced so low. Even if you had a show and sold every piece of the show, you would still lose money. And so I took that upon myself to do that, and I tried that. So I started out, my working capital was $186, and I started out in the basement of the Patrician Apartments at 21st Wisconsin Avenue. And it was tenant storage locker space in the basement. And I traded 3 years free rent in exchange for remodeling the space. Otherwise, I never could have survived that long. And then after 3 years, I realized I wasn't going to make it. And I asked my father if he'd lend me $4,000, which he was nice enough to do. And I took his $4,000 and went to New York in the fall of 1968. And at that time, I was buying original Picassos, signed a number of limited editions for $250. And I'd bring them back here and sell them for $350. I thought I was making a fortune. I was buying one of those for $100, selling them for $150. Salvador Dali's signed original dry points, Charlotte Simon etchings for $50, and so on and so forth. Actually, the most expensive piece I bought at that time was a Kandinsky from the Bauhaus period, 1925. That was in a gallery window on 84th and Madison Avenue. And I walked in there and I said, I want to buy your Kandinsky. How much is it? And he said, $1,250. And I said, I'll take it. And he said, are you a dealer? And I said, yes. He said, well, then you get 10% off. I said, I don't want the discount. Just give me that Kandinsky now. I'll pay you full price. And I was thrilled. And it was edition of 50. I've never seen another one since. I ended up selling it to Sidney Cole, who was the oldest son of Max Cole, who founded Cole's food store. And so Sidney Cole, it was 1968, and so he wanted to start an art collection. So he comes over to 21st Wisconsin and he sees the Kandinsky hanging there. And he says, how much is it? I said, $2,500. And he says, I'd like to buy it, I'll pay you a year from now. So I thought, well, that's kind of odd. But I said, well, that's not acceptable. I'm a small business. I said, but I'll tell you what, Mr. Cole, I'll give you 30 days to look around the world and see if you can find another one like it for less money in this pristine condition as mine. But if you don't find it, then you have to come back in 30 days and pay me $2,500 for mine. So 30 days was up, he came back and paid me. That was that. But I realized how he became a billionaire, and that was by using other people's money. And that's the way they built their empire in Northridge and Southridge and all the grocery stores, because they would go to the bank and they'd borrow the money, and they would borrow more than what they needed, and then they would just keep moving it around, and so on and so forth, and then they renegotiate with the construction companies after they got the money, the loan money from the bank for the first, proposal, and then they negotiate a lower price. and then keep the money and buy some more land and buy more buildings. And that's the way they, that's leveraging. Yeah, but anyway. What else?
I think it's funny he did that with such a small amount of money, but that's what they were used to doing. Like, could have been, $1 million, but I'll pay you next year.
Yeah, right. All the same principles.
That's what he was interested. That's what
Taking advantage of it.
Yeah, so I've learned along the way from my clients.
Speaking of that, there's one story you tell where some clients wanted you to purchase specific works of art, but then when you got them, they didn't like them, but they liked what you picked out. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, so the first time I was going to Paris, different clients I said, well, if you're going to Paris, can you buy me this or buy me that? And so this one client said, can you get us a Bernard Buffet, who was a French artist who was prominent in the 1950s, and then he kind of faded away, except that he had a good market in Japan. Anyway, so I was in Paris and I bought a Bernard Buffet for $50 and I brought it back. I called them up and I said, well, this is $100. And they looked at the Bernard Buffet, they looked at each other and they looked at me and they said, we really don't like this. We have to buy it. And I said, the truth is, I wouldn't have bought this for myself. So why would I want you to buy it? I said, no, you don't have to buy it. But then they looked at a Chagall that I had brought back from Paris. That was $850. They said, well, we like this Chagall. Would you mind if we bought this instead?
No.
So instead of buying a $100 Bernard Buffet, they bought $850 Chagall. And so that was a lesson for me. And from that point on, I never ever bought anything that I didn't love myself. Because I thought, if I sell it, someone else can enjoy it, and if I don't, then I'm just as happy. Maybe happier.
I think that's part of what makes this collection so unique, because we get so many visitors that say, how do you decide what goes on the walls? Never see anything this eclectic. It's really a reflection of David's loves and tastes and his eye, so that's really special.
And then, isn't that what you said? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But at any given time, a lot of your stuff is not even displayed, correct?
There's only, as big as this house is, which is 10,000 square feet, there's only room really to display 5% at any one time. So 95% of what we have is storage rooms here. So you have to look online or else come in and pull things out, But we keep moving things around.
Can you share with us what maybe one of your top 5 favorite pieces is that you've collected throughout the years?
The most celebrated piece in the collection is a 1905 Keith Van Dongen, which I bought in 1988 in Chicago at the Navy Pier Show, and I saw it from like 300 feet away, and I said to myself, I'm in trouble because I'm going to have to buy this damn thing, and I have no idea if I could afford it or how much it cost. And so I bought it. It was about $100,000, and I hung it in our living room over the mantle for many years, and then I thought, well, for fun, I'm going to put this on artnet.com. And within 24 hours, I had 2 museums ask if they could borrow it. One was the new National Museum of Monaco in Monte Carlo. The other one was the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. So I went to those 2 museums, and then the tour was supposed to end, but then Pepe Serra, who was the director of the Picasso Museum in Barcelona, was in Montreal and saw the show. And he said he would take the show to Barcelona, to the Picasso Museum. And it was interesting because Picasso and Keith Van Dongen were actually roommates in Paris in 1900 for a short period of time. They were fighting over a model named Fernando Olivier. And Picasso won that battle. But that's the way that one went. But it turns out that this, the painting is in the other room. You can see it. You've probably seen it already. It's from the Medrano Circus series. And we actually know who the performers are. And the head of the Dutch government was researching the painting at the Wildenstein Institute, who was working on the catalog resume at the time in Paris. And it turns out that Ambrose Vollard was the first dealer to show his work, and this painting was in his gallery in 1905. And he exhibited Vincent van Gogh for the first time, and was probably, Ambrose Vollard, if you could Google him, was probably one of the four most important art dealers in the world in the last 250 years.
Yeah, it's amazing that one piece took you to museums all over the world and you got to travel through that.
Yeah, and then I went to the Museum of Modern Art in Paris. I went to the Albertini Museum in Vienna. So, taking me on a journey.
So what was it that made you get that piece? What was it that struck you that said, I gotta have that piece?
Well, first of all, it was two of the circus performers from the Medrano Circus, and it was a white woman and a black man, which is 1905. And so this, Kees van Dongen made a living painting like 8-foot portraits of wealthy society women from Paris and from Monte Carlo. But this was the true avant-garde artist doing what he was concerned about, which is racism. Yeah. And so, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I looked at it a lot, and I said the expressions on their face, they kind of look so dejected, in the circus. What kind of life is this,
And of course,
I mean, just, yeah.
and of course the circus was such an important part
Yeah.
of culture in Europe and then here too. And I mean, all the French artists went to the Medrano Circus up near the Montmartre. Toulouse-Lautrec and Matisse, they all went there.
David, you've met a lot of interesting people over the years through your career as an art dealer. Can you share maybe one notable experience you had?
Sure. Well, because I used to go to New York all the time. And so one time I was walking down Madison Avenue and I saw Dustin Hoffman come walking across the street. And he was wearing his blue jeans and carrying a shopping bag and stuff. And so he stopped and looked in front of Pearl's gallery window looking at a George Gershwin oil painting. And so I just walked up to the window and started looking at the painting myself. I didn't say anything to him. But like maybe 15 seconds later, he starts talking to me. Well, who are you? And what do you do? I said, well, I'm an art dealer, an artist in Milwaukee. So he said, would you mind coming over to my house and looking at my Toulouse-Lautrecs and telling me if they're famous or not? So this was before cell phones. So we walked south on Madison Avenue to 64th Street. There was an AT&T phone booth right there. And so he says, I just have to call my shrink because I have appointments 5 days a week unless I have something better to do. So that day he wanted me to come to his house for lunch. And so that's the way that went. And anyway, so the maid made us lunch, and there was just he and the maid and his black Labrador named Subway. Yeah, at the time he was married to his second wife, and was a prima ballerina with the New York City Ballet. And so he says to me, my next film is going to be coming out at the Cannes Film Festival, and I rented a villa right on the Mediterranean. Why don't you come and stay with us? So I said, well, I'm really sorry, but I can't. I have to be at an auction in Bern, Switzerland, which is really stupid on my part. I should have just gone. I started playing it cool. A little too cool. Anyway, it was the worst movie he ever made. It was like, my name is Harvey Braverman, and why are they saying all these terrible things about me? It lasted like 2 weeks, and that was gone. But compared to like The Graduate, which I think I saw 8 times, and Bankrupt, which was incredible, which is one of my favorite movies.
So let's talk about the building for a minute, because having the gallery in the space really makes it a unique experience. What made you decide that you wanted to have the gallery in the Button Mansion?
So when I was 16 and had a driver's license, I would drive past this house when I'd leave the gallery on 21st in Wisconsin and go east to Wisconsin Avenue and then drive up Prospect and go to visit my parents in Charlotte. And this house caught my attention, and I actually became obsessed with this house. And I said to myself, someday I'm gonna buy it. I don't know when, but so in 1985, I'm going past the house, there's a sign on the lawn that says for rent. So I kept driving. 3 weeks later, I'm going past the house. Now I think I'm hallucinating because the sign says for sale. So I called a realtor and said I need to look at the house, and which I did. And I thought, well, we got to buy this house. So Ogden had the listing on it, and I called Ogden's office and they said, we're taking offers till Friday at 5 p.m. And so I left my lawyer's office at 4:30 with my offer to purchase and went in and asked for Mr. Ogden. And he comes down the stairs in his office and I said, here's my offer to buy the building. He says, well, you're too late. I sold the house at 2 o'clock today. But I looked at my watch and it was 4:50. I said, but Mr. Ogden, you said you're taking offers till 5 p.m. and it's only 4:50. He looks at me, I sold the house at 2 o'clock. He was a nasty guy. Anyway, so I called a realtor friend of mine and I said, can you get a hold of the offer to purchase that they accepted? And so I read this contract. It was 4 pages, and the last line on the last contract page said 20, it had a clause 20-day right of first refusal. So now I'm thinking, I gotta think creatively, for a change. So I thought, what if I could buy the right of first refusal like you buy a painting or a car? So I called my lawyer, I said, can I buy the right of first refusal? He says, well, I don't know. He was a labor lawyer, but even though he graduated from Harvard Law School and was a Rhodes Scholar. He said we didn't spend a lot of time talking to the real estate lawyers in the office, which meant he couldn't charge me too much for my own idea. But anyway, so he calls the lawyer for the guy that had the right of first refusal that had gone bankrupt because he was selling real estate tax shelters to wealthy people that didn't want to pay taxes, and when the federal government declared them all illegally, I went bankrupt. So anyway, so he says he wants $3 grand for the right of first refusal. So I said, great, I'll take it. So now I think I'm in the driver's seat. Well, the next morning the phone rings. He said, I got some bad news. What's that? We called Fred Luber, who owned Super Steel, who was Mr. Ogden's friend, who had thought he was buying the building for $480,000, and he's offering $10,000 for the right of first refusal. I said, wait a second here. How come you're a lawyer, he's a lawyer, and you agreed to sell it to me for $3,000? Why isn't that being honored? He says, because it wasn't in writing. It was verbal. I said, did you ever hear the word ethics? No. So they said, if you'll offer $10,000, if you'll match this offer for $10,000, then we'll let you buy the building. I exercise that. I said, okay, if I say 10, we'll go back to him and he'll say 25. No, I'm out, bidding war with a billionaire. But so they were greedy, but they could have been greedier. But they stopped at 10 and then they paid $490 instead of $480. So here we are.
Wow. That's
Yeah, the house cost $30,000 to build in 1875, 10,000 square feet. This originally had 10 fireplaces, 26 rooms. And I'm the first person to own it to have it open free to the public. So like this fireplace, for example, is original and it's Carrara marble. And so the great sculptor Michelangelo, his marble sculptures came out of the same quarry as this stone did, but then of course so did everybody else's.
What's your favorite feature about the building?
I think every day I come to work and I approach the house and it's just such a magnificent work of art. Edward Townsend Nix was the architect, the preeminent Victorian architect in Wisconsin, really. It's just such a masterpiece. Everything about it, all the details, everything was custom made for it.
So, David, can you tell us about maybe some of the challenges or hurdles you had to overcome during your time operating the art gallery?
Yeah, of course, to be in business for 60 years is a challenge in itself, and going through at least 14 recessions over the years was possible. But I was probably the worst student on the planet. I only got A's in art and economics, and I got a D in accounting in college. But so I think it's the passion and persistence and my love of art has kept me going all these years. In the face of adversity or whatever you have to deal with, Yeah.
And what's the most rewarding part, would you say?
The most rewarding part is to have the pleasure of meeting and working with people like yourselves that come in and enjoy the art and the architecture and everything. That's what's the fun part for me.
Wonderful. Well, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap up?
No? Does anybody have any questions for me?
I do. Aside from the Saul cartoons in the New Yorker that your father shared with you, were your parents creative? Did they take you to see art? How did you become engaged visually? What was the first thing that you recall?
So I was born with a half a brain. I got the right brain. I'm all visual. That's the way my mind has always worked. Now my father ran a textile mill, and I used to go to work and thread looms as a child. That was mostly my business. And during World War II, they made army blankets for the war, but I used to thread looms. But my mother liked to sew, and she liked to cook and bake, and so that influenced me too. And she liked to collect American antiques and things like that. But they weren't really art collectors per se. But they did love music, and then my mother and my sisters used to take ballet lessons, and my mother would take us to all the musicals in Milwaukee when we were 5, 6, 7 years old. So so that was, and we'd go. If they were out of town, they'd bring me catalogs from museums, on Chagall or different artists. So that influenced me. Yeah. And then my first kindergarten teacher, Sylvia Spicuzza, who I had from kindergarten through 6th grade, was an influence on me as well. Her dad was a prominent artist, Francesco Spicuzza.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So what kind of advice do you have for people who are starting to build an art collection with, we're focused on Wisconsin artists here in Wisconsin, but it's hard to sort of distinguish what you buy, and we do it out of a love for the pieces, but we also have, a vision of what we want a collection to be. So what kind of advice do you have?
I think collecting art is very personal, and there is no right or wrong way of doing it. It's really your way, and that's the best way. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. At the same time, I'm available if anybody has any questions about it or wants to run something past me. What if this or what if that, or should it do this or that, whatever. I'm happy to share my thoughts about it from my experience.
And then you said that most of your work is not exhibited, and then you can go online, but if you have a specific thing that you're looking for, can you work with your staff or work with you to sort of determine if you have pieces that we
Yeah,
can
so,
see?
because we get requests all the time. If you say, well, I'm looking for such and such, so then we'll keep it in our minds. And with our networking on a worldwide basis, we can search for things and sometimes come up with things that people want, for sure. Yeah, so we're happy to get a list of what people are looking for, definitely.
Kim,
I have some questions. So I know you're happy to purchase a house, but I want to know what condition was the house in when you purchased it? Was it in the immaculate condition? Was it in the renovations? Also, I love the details within the house, like doorknobs and the crown moldings. Were those original, or did you have to?
So the house has a lot of integrity to it. Actually, these doors here in the hardware was from a previous remodeling. But so these aren't original, even though they look pretty good. But the ball bearing hinges that are very elaborate, those are originals, and the original doorknobs, the brass doorknobs, are original, and the doors are all solid mahogany. So there's a lot of it is original.
Was the house like move-in ready, or was it?
So it took us about 3 months to redo because when I bought it, there was a lot of wallpaper in all the rooms, so we had to strip all that down. We had to put in an extensive alarm system, a complete new lighting system, repaint everything, and all new carpeting, and closed circuit TV we put in, and so on. Yeah. It was a job, but it's ongoing because the house is 150 years old, so there's always something going on it. It's a labor of love. Yeah.
It's great that you've preserved it. Because so many of these, most of the mansions on Prospect have been knocked down, right? So it's great that.
Yeah, and I've been approached since 1985, since I bought it, by some different developers that say they want to buy it, and I said, well, what are you going to do with it? And they said, tear it down. I said, this conversation has concluded.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So now that I'm 80 years old, and I'm not King Tut, so I can't take 6,000 artworks with me. We've started a 501c3 nonprofit called ART, that's for Artist Resource Transnational, with the main mission of preserving artist legacies. So that's what we're working on now.
all right, well, thank you, David, so much for sharing all of your stories.